What's up, nerds? There's a growing question on if NATO is going to send troops to Ukraine. And we're not talking about troops that might be already in Ukraine to assist with targeting. We're talking about a whole new contingent of troops that could amount from anywhere between 2,000 troops to 20,000 French troops and even a whole coalition of around 60,000 troops. Now, Russia has already made a claim, and there's no evidence to support this, that France has already sent 2,000 troops and has threatened those troops with becoming a priority target for Russia. But needless to say, this is a growing conversation since the last time we talked about it, and we need to talk about it. Now, of course, on that video a couple weeks ago, we discussed the comments by French President Emmanuel Macron, saying that they could not rule out sending NATO troops to Ukraine. Needless to say, that conversation has continued over the past couple weeks and gained a little bit of traction, but I do think that we need to talk about how maybe that's become a little overblown. Of course, some other NATO allies were not necessarily against the idea, but others like Germany or the United States were very against the idea. Macron hasn't exactly backed down from these statements. However, he has kind of tamed his stance a little bit, saying that France will not take the initiative on this issue. I've said before on some past videos that I think that he's really just trying to achieve some level of strategic ambiguity, which NATO has really lacked in this war. But it's still something that we need to dig into because there's still a lot of talk coming out of both France and other countries about the idea of sending NATO troops to Ukraine. With Macron's comment saying that France will not initiate this, it might be that France is waiting for Ukraine to make the appeal to France for assistance. However, we've seen a comment from President Zelensky stating that Ukraine won't need NATO troops as long as Ukrainian troops hold the line. And I think this is really where we get to the heart of the issue here and really why NATO troops wouldn't be that effective, at least right now. NATO troops in Ukraine, and that's really only if they're sending that full contingent of what's reported to be up to 60,000 troops, that really only solves the manpower issue in just one specific area. And if you consider how large the front line is, that's not that substantial. Ukraine has manpower issues right now, however, they have a relatively easy fix to solve that. And I say easy being the operative word here. All they need to do is pass a mobilization bill, and that's way easier said than done, but that could unlock a new pool of somewhere between 300 to 500,000 military-age males in Ukraine that could become drafted and join the services. It's also been reported that up to 300,000 military-age males have left Ukraine since the start of the war, and the Slovakian defense minister has actually called for NATO countries to send those individuals back to Ukraine to fight. Now, why that mobilization bill matters is because it extends the draft age from 27 down to 25. Currently, Ukraine is drafting individuals no younger than 27 years old, and they're trying to do this to not put themselves in a demographic crisis as soon as the war's over. With many women and children leaving Ukraine and with the obvious spike in mortality of Ukrainian men in the past couple of years, Ukraine faces demographic challenges here in the next several decades. Of course, military service remains voluntary for those 18 and older, but for the government to draft individuals into service, the new bill would be required to draft people 25 and older. And Ukrainian troops desperately need relief. A lot of the troops that are currently on the front line have been there since the war started, so they've been serving for up to 2 years in high-intensity combat, and they need to be rotated out for some relief. Further, a lot of soldiers that are joining the Ukrainian military right now need enhanced training, and that increases the amount of time between whenever they join the service and when they're actually able to join the fight. And that, of course, increases the strain on the soldiers on the front line because they're having to hold for longer before the relief relieves them. Of course, all of this can be a lot simpler with a larger quantity of soldiers, but simply put, right now, there's no quick and easy solution for the soldiers on the front line. And neither of these things can be fixed without really a mobilization bill. However, ultimately what Ukraine needs is ammunition, and with the U.S. aid bill stuck in Congress and with U.S. Congress entering into a 2-week recess period, that's not likely to happen anytime soon, at least from the United States. Europe, of course, is increasing its aid to Ukraine, and there's a Czech initiative that should send over 1 million artillery rounds to Ukraine in the coming months. However, reports that I've seen indicate that those shells won't arrive to Ukraine until at least June. That leaves at least 2 months that Ukraine's going to have to hold out and continue this ammunition shortage while Russia continues to advance. Still, that Czech initiative is really just a band-aid solution and a short-term solution to what is a long-term problem. The US and the European Union really need to increase their artillery ammunition production rate to be able to keep up with consumption, which they are woefully well below. All of the Czech initiative is doing right now is just pulling from existing stockage. Now, with all these problems being stated, let's go back to the NATO troops. Even if it's true that up to 60,000 NATO troops could end up in Ukraine at some point, that's really not likely anytime soon, if at all. And even then, those 60,000 troops may not even be engaged with Russian troops. They might just be there for other kinds of security duties. And even if they were engaged in the fight, that still doesn't solve Ukraine's existing problems with manpower and ammunition that we've just discussed. Ukraine needs more troops to number in the hundreds of thousands. And they need massive quantities of ammunition. And they need these things fast because while Russia has been dealing with some of the same issues, they're moving incredibly fast to address those problems, and they're seeking to exploit Ukraine's shortfalls in a coming offensive. I will say that if there is a 2,000 strong contingent of NATO troops that go to Ukraine to assist with training, that can make a difference. However, at the same time, it doesn't really make much sense to house that training in Ukraine when they could just house it in other neighboring NATO countries. I mean, these are not significant distances that we're dealing with here between NATO and Ukraine. And training is already being done of Ukrainian troops in NATO countries. And as far as Russia is concerned, that may as well be done on the other side of the world. Russia is not going to strike Ukrainian training centers in Romania or Germany. And those countries are close enough that they could just bus the Ukrainian graduates back to Ukraine within a day or two and get them into the fight within the week. Training them in Ukraine, however, does make them a target. And that not only puts the NATO troops at risk, but that puts the Ukrainian recruits at risk. Now, with all that being said, we may still continue to see this rhetoric coming from Macron because, again, he might be trying just to get some semblance of strategic ambiguity. But I don't assess that we're going to see anything significant in real life anytime soon. And even if we did, it probably wouldn't fix any of the problems that we just talked about. Now, with all that, I want to hear your thoughts, so comment them down below and subscribe for more analysis on these kinds of topics if you're interested in this stuff. And like this video if you found it interesting. It really helps this channel grow and it helps this video get out to new audiences so they can also join this discussion. With all that, I'll see you all next time. Bye.